All right. Good evening and welcome to voting today. Right now, I will be speaking about foreign policy, what it means, a brief history, some popular issues that we face today, and some of the goals that our government is trying to reach. First, I would like to start off by explaining the meaning of foreign policy. Now, basically, foreign policy is a plan of action adopted by one nation in regards to its diplomatic dealings with other countries. So that essentially means that, it's a systematic way to deal with issues that could arise between one country and another, either with its allies or with some enemies. Now that we have a general understanding of what foreign policy is, I would like to discuss some of our nation's foreign policy goals. Now, the logical source would be the State Department. Their job is to define our country's foreign policy goals and keep a direct line of contact with the president to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. Now, these goals are as following: preserving the national security of the United States, which is pretty self-explanatory; promoting world peace and a secure global environment; maintaining a balance of power among nations; working with allies to solve international problems; promoting democratic values and human rights; furthering cooperative foreign trade and global involvement in international trade organizations. Now, these goals are just basic general ideas. They're not exactly what our country is looking to do, but you can tell that these goals are based on cooperation with other nations, even though we're trying to preserve our national security. But that could also imply some type of competition or conflict. As for a really quick example of how the United States would exercise foreign policy would be through economic aid, like famine relief in North Korea provides not only a humanitarian aspect of form of assistance, but also like a strong foothold for a development of democratic ideals and institutions for the future of North Korea. Another example from our country's history would be one that President Theodore Roosevelt had brought into ideology, which is well known, the big stick diplomacy, the big stick policy. And this refers to his foreign policy, which is quoted as "speak softly and carry a big stick." He described this foreign policy as the exercise of intelligent forethought and of decisive action sufficiently far in advance of any likely crisis. Now, to dig a little bit deeper into the big stick diplomacy, we can discuss some of its usage and the fact that it was used before Roosevelt's presidency. But what Roosevelt did, he backed it up with a little bit more military muscle, and he did this multiple times within his 2 terms as president. He within this policy enforced the Monroe Doctrine and multiple interventions in Latin America, and this included the Great White Fleet, which was 16 battleships, which peacefully circumnavigated the globe as an illustration of the United States rising yet neutral prestige under Roosevelt's direction. Now, to put this in some easier terms, it's basically, walking around being extremely cocky and confident, but keeping a peaceful demeanor. Like I said before, how with the Great White Fleet, they were circumnavigating the globe and its waters, just basically showing off what the United States has got, making everybody a little bit nervous. And that's really what that policy was about. After some quick examples, I'm going to go through somewhat of a brief history of the underlining goals that our nation's had dealing with foreign policy in the past. the officially stated goals foreign policy of the United States, as mentioned in the foreign policy agenda of the U.S. Department of State, are to build and sustain a more democratic, secure, and prosperous world for the benefit of the American people and the international community. Now, this has been a plan for years and years. For example, when our country or other countries have tried to aid in overthrowing another government, to put in somebody with democratic power so they can have a president and to basically liberate that country. Now, to go back into some of the years after World War II, the United States was guided generally by containment, the policy of keeping communism from spreading beyond the already influenced countries. This policy applied to a world divided by the Cold War and that struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Now, central to America's foreign policy in the post-war period was the containment of the Soviet Union and communism. During the Cold War, the United States and its allies competed with the Soviet Union and its allies militarily, economically, and ideologically. This was the reason for NATO being instated, and it was built to, contain communism. And that was one of the big issues that Donald Trump was speaking about in the 2016 election, where he was saying that, NATO is out of date and we're not trying to contain communism anymore. Instead, we're trying to defeat and destroy terrorism across the world. Now, with that being said, I'm going to take that and lead it into, the most popular foreign policy issues of 2016 and what, what the candidates were debating about during their campaign. Some of the big ones are Syrian refugees, how we're going to handle our war on ISIS, then terrorism in general, the issue with the United Nations, torture, foreign aid, NSA surveillance, North Korean military strikes, what's going on in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, the Russian airstrikes in Syria, as I mentioned before, NATO. Another big one was military spending in general, and whether we should be doing more military cuts or raising the budget for the military. Now, with all that being said, it's time to move on to our social media segment. Alright, in this segment, I'll be reading tweets, hence the bird chirps. So, over the past month, I have tweeted on an account called FP 2016 election. You can look that up. It's capital F, capital P, 2016, and then lowercase election. On here, I've been tweeting about foreign policy and some of the views of the previous candidates. My first tweet was, "What is foreign policy?" And then from there, I did explain foreign policy in following tweets. Foreign policy spans from dealing with other nations on global issues like energy, climate change. And besides just speaking about what foreign policy is, I did tweet about both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and their views on national security and their plans for our country on foreign policy. I did receive a few favorites on some of my tweets. One account was Dudley, and that just looks like a dog. And another one was Leo, who actually also tweets about foreign policy. So that was pretty cool. Well, this definitely concludes this segment of social media, and it also concludes this podcast. So I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and hopefully you guys will stay tuned, and you'll be here to listen to me talk about foreign policy another time. Well, I hope you guys have a great night, and hopefully I'll see you back again. And now some words from our sponsors.